Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Pace, and welcome back to all of you who are already subscribers to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one that you've coming at you right now, coming off a really great Kimura submission win at the Sprawl in the Burgh 3 for 247 Fighting Championships event. That was a no-gi submission only event. There were some submissions. You had a submission, but there were also a lot of decisions. Very excited to have back on the show, hailing out of Railroad City Jiu-Jitsu, Kyle. Cam, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great having you back on the show. It was wonderful meeting you in person. It's always nice to have new people on the video, but it's better to meet in person. We had a great time, a little bit of time we had together in person prior to your competition there. You ended up getting a really nice submission win, the Kimura. Let's talk about that. But before we do, back up, how'd you feel coming into it? Did you do any type of preparation specific to this being a non-tournament? I know we had talked about how, as jiu-jitsu practitioners, a lot of people do tournaments. Is this unique, doing like a one-off super fight? Like, how was the preparation different than if you were doing a tournament? And then we'll build right into the match itself.
I prepared a lot of cardio. You got 1 6-minute bout, and it seems like I think when you first start in jiu-jitsu, you think 6 minutes is a long time, but then when you think about a competition match, 6 minutes can be like nothing. It flies by. So I figured I would train high intensity cardio, a lot of wrestling, like heavy demand, and that way I could just blow it all out there at once. And I tried to still stay reserved while I was in there, at least until you figure out what you're up against. Because I honestly had no idea what Kaufman was going to do. I had no idea what his style was, but I tried to be well-rounded and just train high cardio.
Well, that makes sense. And that's something that is very common for people that don't know. In the MMA world, it's usually a little uncommon to not know things about your opponent, unless your debut. But usually once there's some tape out there in MMA, you could kind of know what your fighter's about some of the time, at least. In jiu-jitsu, it's very common, like you just said, Cam, it's very common to not know much at all. If it's a tournament, you might not even really know what they look like until they walk out, because tournaments oftentimes are flowing, so you're busy on one mat and they call winner of this mat to winner of that mat type thing. So makes sense. There's a mental game there that you did very well. Let's break down the match. It did not go all 6 minutes. You got the great Kimura submission. To my eyes, it looked like you had a really good, what some people would call chain attacks, where you were in a position where you were attempting potentially to set up for one submission, and then you ended up transitioning to a couple others. Kind of walk through the match and then really detail the setup that led to the submission.
Yeah. So when we started on the feet, I wanted to start standing. Like I can wrestle a little bit, so I was hoping to get a takedown into a position where I was already past the guard, and so I locked up an underhook, and then I think I got the second underhook and connected my hands, and I was walking him over toward the cage. I wanted to try and pin him on the cage and pull his feet out, or something, but he threw a throw attempt, and I sagged my hips, and he ended up switching back and attacking the legs, and I figured we might get into that position, but I was up against the cage, so it was kind of tricky. Then I couldn't scramble too much, so I decided I'll attack his feet in hopes that he'll let go of my feet. And so we were there for a little while, and all the while when I was attacking the feet, I was kind of waiting for my opportunity to transition up back into traditional jiu-jitsu. And I saw the opportunity to chase the back a little bit, and I knew when he had turtled up, he was most likely going to hit his shoulders to the mat. So I locked the head and arm choke from the turtle. When he hit the mat, I hopped up into the mount with the head and arm, freed my knee, and got into side control. And from there, he had tucked his chin and was taking the choke on the face. So I knew that he was going to start pressing toward the escape route. And from the head and arm choke, if you can visualize it, the Kimura hand, it's right there. So
it's this hand, so it's already there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that being said, I just had locked onto the wrist, stuck
Mm.
my knee pillow in, and then trapped the forearm, locked the Kimura up. I took one big attempt at first, and I felt I was a little bit eager there, so I calmed down and I waited for his defense to fall off of that, and I pulled it out, put it behind his back, and he tapped. So that was the, and I honestly, it was it couldn't have gone better than I had hoped it for. I mean, it was a good night.
Yeah, it certainly, I'm glad to get your feedback. From the outside, I was cage side. Certainly looked like it couldn't have gone better. Looked like you really had a great progression. You guys got into that 50-50 a little bit, both attacking feet, which can be tricky, but obviously you got out of it. And that's higher level jujitsu in practitioners. So obviously you're competent there. What I really liked was how, and this will make sense to people, like how tight and methodical you were. A lot of times in jiu-jitsu, the thing that sets beginning jiu-jitsu apart from advanced jiu-jitsu is more just the application, right? There are some maybe more complicated, but none of what you did was super complicated. It was just the application of it was very tight. There shouldn't be a lot of space between you and an opponent. A lot of people have like loose hips or weak hips. Like you kept everything really, really. And I was watching your hips and your knee. You said the knee pillow even before you got the Kimura finished. A lot of people focus on the arm, but then if they don't set up with their hips and their legs, their opponent can counter and roll through and do some of the stuff to escape. You really seem to like glue that first, like really cinch to him, like suck tight to him, get down on him, and really secure what his defense would be prior to doing. Is that specific to how you've been trained at Railroad City Jiu-Jitsu? Is that just something you've kind of developed? I know certain styles do certain things, or is that what you would consider all good jiu-jitsu to do?
Yeah, I think that when you transition, especially into a submission that you plan on finishing, like sometimes you lock up submissions that you want to threaten with, but I wanted to finish that one. I thought that if I could block off his shoulders from hitting the mat, like I called it knee pillow, I'm not sure what anybody else would call it, but I block off his shoulders from hitting the mat. That's when I know that I can really work for the submission. So when I use my other knee to trap his other arm, I knew that it was then, it was my two arms versus his one arm, and that's a good situation. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that most good jiu-jitsu guys would probably set up their finish that way before they go for it. Like you get in a good position to finish your submission. But when you're nervous and when the adrenaline is pumping too, it's easy to fire your best shot before everything's set up. And I didn't want to do that, and I almost did. If you rewatch it, I grabbed a hold of it as soon as I did. I didn't want to waste any time. I ripped it out, and Kaufman hit his hand. And then I thought, okay, settle down, just relax. Everything's in place. And then as soon as I saw the defense fall, that's when I threw the second attempt, which I should have done that probably right the first time, but it worked out.
Yeah, and there's in match in fight adjustments all the time, and sometimes the adjustments happen when you're like, wait, that didn't work. So well, now you kind of go back. Like I often talk people with the basics of rear naked choke. You'll see guillotines and rear naked chokes. The person on the offense will often gas their arms out because they get a guillotine or rear naked choke, and they get so excited. Understandably, it's a high percentage choke that they don't really focus on the little things like where they are they under, so they end up sometimes gassing out. So a lot of times I would say, hey, once you've given it 3 to 5 seconds and you don't hear a gurgle, they're not tapping, it's not really locked in, then it's time to take a breath, like you said, take a breath and kind of back it back to the basics and start thinking like, how do I break this down? Knee pillow sounds great. I would almost say like a knee clamp because you really clamped onto him. But yeah, the knee position and the hip position is a big deal. It's also a big deal. I would have thought from that position that you could have fallen back for the arm bar. In many ways, I'll ask it to you. I think I know why you didn't. For the arm bar finish, which Ronda Rousey would do a lot to that side, it's a great finish. If it's defended, then 9 times out of 10, if it's defended, the opponent is now on top because they kind of roll through. if you get back to that armbar off to the side, if it's defended, which hopefully it wouldn't be, but if it is, they get on top. Is that one of the reasons why for your style when you're in side control and mount, obviously side triangle choke or arm triangle choke, I think is one of the best and most dominant because you can stay safe while you're doing it. But like you showed that you could transition from that because of that, that arm that's already isolated into the Kimura. Is that why you approach the Kimura from there? Because if the Kimura doesn't happen, you're still in this clamped position where you still have a lot of attacks. Is that something that you purposely do so you don't fall back to the armbar, or do you sometimes take that route?
Yeah, if I think about a Kimura versus an armbar, I think that a Kimura is harder to escape, at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
There's a couple of armbar escapes that are hard to predict. And actually, I'm glad that I didn't go with the armbar because I went up to the veteran Bushido fight, and Kaufman was fighting there too, and I watched him escape an armbar with a fundamental escape, and that could have been me, But the Kimura, I think that it's I don't know, it's maybe a little bit more difficult to escape if it's set up the right way, and it's easier to stay on top because if you're the top guy, you're fighting with gravity. So gravity pressing down plus your jiu-jitsu together makes it kind of like a 2 versus 1. So yeah, that's mostly it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I appreciate you getting into the kind of the weeds and the thought of it. Obviously, that's what's cool about jiu-jitsu. Everybody can develop their own style. I agree with you. I think everybody learning jiu-jitsu should learn as many, not just submissions, but escapes as possible. Escapes can be layered. Sometimes one escape will be blocked, but it will set up a better escape. Like it'll set up like a layered escape, depending on how somebody blocks it. And obviously, in any submission situation, like Kaufman found out with you, at some point, you do run out of options in jiu-jitsu. That's why the tap is there, because at some point, somebody's going to have a better day and be able to clamp down and get something. You mentioned arm bars. I think there are some really good fundamental armbar escapes, but at some point, an armbar can be locked in so well that you're not getting out of it either. But there are times where certain submissions have, I think, more likelihood. It was really, really cool. What do you want to do next? Are you a high constantly doing tournaments, or do you kind of pick and choose more more just to compete a couple times a year? Like what's next for you? And what was it like for you being on Sprawl, if I remember right, I believe for the first time, where it was in a cage separate from a tournament and those type things?
Yeah, it was my second Sprawl actually. I did
Second
Sprawl
Sprawl.
1 and then
Ah,
Sprawl 3, but
great.
I liked, I love Sprawl. I think it's a good promotion. I think that 247 are good people and they're doing great things too. And but yeah, I think I work full time Monday to Friday, and I have 3 kids. I own Railroad City Jiu Jitsu and operate that with my brother. And so like there's a lot going on there, and I'm a little pickier with the competitions that I like to do. So we do coach a lot of guys in their competitions, but we're eyeing up IBJJF. I think that tournament wise, it's the smoothest and nicest tournaments. I like the rule set the best. And so yeah, that's what we have our eyes set on, traveling a little bit this summer for IBJJF. And yeah, that's what's in the immediate future, at least. That's what I'm looking at.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you mentioned the last time you were on that you were the co-owner and one of the main coaches at Railroad City. Really fantastic. I think that's incredible that you and your brother running it, but that's a business first. Competition is good because clearly you're good. You got great skills, and I think it does help. I think it does help your athletes to see that you're competing, but obviously you're not going to compete at the same frequency. And tournaments like Naga can be great, but to your point, it's good to be picky at your level to pick a tournament where you think it's run better, slightly better. I think for people that are starting out and want a lot of repetition, some jiu-jitsu practitioners will have 50, maybe 100 matches in a year because they just do tournament, then you don't have to be picky. But for you, obviously, be really great. Before you and your brother head out to IBJJF tournament, I'd love to have either you separately or together on. Maybe we could do it together with you guys at videoing at Railroad City. That would be kind of cool inside the gym. But I'll definitely want to stay in contact with you and your brother as you go forward. But clearly, it seems like you're doing a lot now. because this is MMA Fancast, and I try to cover aspects of MMA, so that's wrestling, jiu-jitsu, sometimes boxing I've had on, obviously Muay Thai, kickboxing. But on the jiu-jitsu side, do you have competitors that are training into MMA? And if so, what's it like running an MMA program, or are you guys running kind of a solo BJJ program?
So yeah, we don't, I guess we don't lean towards MMA like cage fighting, but we do different martial arts, and it's mostly grappling based. So we open Railroad City Jiu Jitsu because we know a lot of people who are into grappling and wrestling. We've met tons of guys, and I mean, even growing up, there were a lot of talented guys in Altoona, and we thought, what if we put a mat room together and we started training. And Sean and I have always been doing jujitsu and learning from Johnny Miller and Coach Marcel. And so when we got to mix it up with these other guys that we've known, the guys that have a wrestling background, guys that have a judo background, and of course some of our guys, they like to throw gloves on and duke it out in the gym and whatnot. That's not my specialty.
Sure.
If they ever asked me to be there to support them in a fight, I definitely would, but I can't be a fight coach. If you and I put gloves on, you'd bloody my nose. That's all I know.
Well, I might bloody your nose, sir, but then you would rip an arm off of me. So I think overall it would work out very well in your favor. But really great. And that now is making sense because I remember that we've had a Sean Kyle compete
Yeah,
as well. So that's a look at my brain putting two and two together. Cam Kyle, Sean Kyle,
it's
brothers.
it's confusing. We look alike too.
Yeah, that will, there you go. Are you twins?
No, no, I'm 2 years older than him. But yeah, we look pretty similar, and we have, if you watch us grapple too, we have two different styles. So he's his own grappler for sure, and he's dangerous.
Yeah, well, I definitely remember him being as well. So that is exciting. Great that you're that close with your brother. I have an identical twin brother. And so obviously we are very, physically alike, kind of like you guys being 2 years apart. So shout out to Mark because he listens to all of these interviews. So he's my biggest fan. But great. I think it's wonderful that you and your brother, it would be a dream of mine to do anything with my twin as a career. I think that's special. Not a lot of people get that opportunity. I was talking to Ethan the Wolverine Goss, who's a two-time champ for 247. And he was on the broadcast, wonderful guy. And he runs an excavation company with his dad. An excavation company is his dad and himself, which is really a dream another way. Obviously, it's a lot of hard work. What you and John do, a lot of hard work. What Ethan and his dad, Mr. Goss, does a lot of hard work. But I think that's like unique to be able to be so close with a family member, to be able to make a business work too, goes a long way. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. I'd love to follow you and Sean and some of the people out of your gym going forward. So obviously keep in touch. Thanks so much for coming on. For people that are interested, you can get the replay for Sprawl in the Burgh 3 from 247fighting.com or the 247 Live app. You can buy the replay. Go ahead potentially and get the whole year subscription. It'll save you a lot of money because then you get every pay-per-view plus the entire data bank of all the catalog of fights and sprawls as well. Thanks so much for coming on. This has been Luke Payson with MMA Fancast and special guest fresh off his Kimura victory, Cam Kyle. Thanks so much, Cam. Take care. Vaya con Dios, as we say in the Spanish world. You take care.